Can the Eagles go 17-0? 17-0. Can the Eagles beat the Texans? See, folks, you come up with a title during the day, and you think, what are we going to be talking about when we're watching the Eagles at the Texans? Two Philadelphia Houston games tonight. World Series also. Interesting harmonic convergence there. Matt Waldman. But tonight's game aside, I don't want to say, can the Eagles go 17-0? Here's what I think is the more interesting question. Should they want to go 17-0? Is it going to be helpful for them if they go 17-0 into the playoffs?
That's a more interesting question, actually.
Yeah.
Because psychologically, you wonder how a team, especially a team that's a little bit on the younger side in terms of its leadership, would deal with being 17-0 in the postseason in the NFL. It's one thing to be doing it at Alabama as Jalen Hurts. It's another thing to be doing it here. So I think it would be harder because of the media scrutiny and the pressure that would be involved, but it would be a welcomed thing to be able to have that happen. But it would also be one of those deals where I'm sure that there are some coaches that would be thinking to themselves, I can never say out loud what I'm really thinking, which is, I wish we lost a couple of tough games to show that we could be resilient, because we need to learn resilience in the third and fourth quarter of games. And there's something to be said about that. So, yeah, I don't think it's a healthy thing. And I didn't think they were going to go. The answer before, we see the score here would have been no, because they still have division games to play. They've got two against the Giants. And I know that the Giants offense, for us in the fantasy sphere, look at that and go, well, they're not that great. They're better than what they were, but how are they going to beat the Eagles? But their defense isn't bad. And they've held some team. They've been able to keep scoring down. And the Cowboys have played good defense, and they've got Dak back. So the fact that they're going to face those teams, plus New Orleans, who's starting to seem to get a little of their mojo together, even though they're getting used to life without Michael Thomas for the long haul. I think those are teams that I think can do it. And they play the Giants twice, and rarely does a team sweep their division. And now the Giants might be keen to be the team open for that to happen, because Brian Daboll doesn't know this division as well as as maybe the Cowboys staff has had an opportunity to do. But yeah, I'm thinking that they probably lose 2 to 3 games this year, and this might be one of them.
This might be one of them, yeah.
Because can we just say this? Because we're both a couple AFC wonks. We know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The NFC is the lesser conference. Even when they're better, they're the lesser conference. At least to folks like us who live in the North, the AFC North.
Yeah. And I think you're right when you look at the schedule. It's Dallas. The Dallas game is the one you circle. Dallas looks a really formidable team, and even a team that has different ways they can beat you. Now, Philadelphia, going into tonight, their offense took another step forward. Now Jalen Hurts has got his deep ball dialed in to A.J. Brown. That's great. That's great for opposition. And the defense, you add Robert Quinn, and you've got talent on every level. Remember, you got James Bradbury and Darius Slay outside. You got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, C.D. Deuce, who just gives you that spark plug, that attitude, that swagger. Just there's something he adds to the defense more than his play and his versatility. They have good linebackers for the first time in forever. They haven't even used to Kobe Dean yet. And a deep defensive line.
Yeah, when you can have an aging Brandon Graham and bubble wrap and wait till the playoffs where everybody's injured but him, you can counteract the age a little bit for a few games with him. He might be a terror in the playoffs if he's not needed to be used until then.
Yeah, Jordan Davis got banged up. I think maybe he's on IR. I don't know. But the point is they have just talent. And on offense, they can beat you in multiple ways. But, of course, tonight, Davis Mills, Pep Hamilton. Can we mention the name Pep Hamilton, Matt? I mean,
Yeah.
a good first drive, prepared. I thought this was going to look like a mismatch. Dameon Pierce running well, and Dameon Pierce continuing to stand for. So here's a question I'll tee up for you, Matt. After watching Dameon Pierce, how surprised are you at two levels? One, we can say that he's successful, but that he got this chance this early in his career.
Not too surprised about it. I'm more surprised that they haven't used him as much as a receiver, because that was really one of his best skills coming out. And I know that Burkhead, Sexy Rexy is, part of the deal here, but I really thought that Pierce, with the skills that he has, would possibly get a chance to really get his bones by taking that part over first and then transitioning over to the ground attack. But then when you look at Burkhead as a runner and Marlon Mack, kind of used up, I think that at that point it makes sense now that Pierce got that early thing. And he looks like, he kind of looks like that Marion Barber type of back, who's got he's got the quick feet. He's going to run through you, run over you, and can run around at least one guy, and he can get into the secondary and make it tough for you in terms of trying to bring him down. And of course, when they do use him as a receiver, he catches the ball. And I just like to see Davis Mills, his track continues to go up, even if it's not from a fantasy result standpoint. It's kind of like watching one of those graphs where the overall line's going up, but you see that there's variations going rising and falling with each week with him, but it's still moving up. And you got that Stanford pipeline thing going on with him. So it's if they could get some wide receivers who are healthy,
right,
find that or hit on a tight end who they thought might have been promising but hasn't worked out. And I wasn't even talking about OJ Howard, though you could talk about him in that respect as well. Their offense is their quarterback and their running back. And that's fortunately all these too high looks and things like that are making it helping them stay competitive. Because if it was last year, I don't think they'd I don't even think they'd have the one win and one tie they have.
Yeah, that's the thing about this game is we're watching Philadelphia take the ball to open the second half, is that on the Texans side, they were comically undermanned on offense. Philip Dorsett, Chris Moore, I think Jalen Camp, the size speed Georgia Tech guy, finally getting on the field, right?
Yeah.
These are some of the players that they were going to be using in their passing game tonight. And Tegan Quatoriano gets the touchdown to open things up. But Dameon Pierce, let's just play real quick. Let's play a little game. I wish I had a little theme. Play a little Herb Alpert or something. Like, would you rather have Dameon Pierce or? Let's just see. Let's do a heat check, okay?
Yeah.
Dameon Pierce or Ramondre Stevenson?
I'd still rather have Ramondre Stevenson, but it's very close just because of red zone opportunities.
Yeah, and it seems like Mac Jones likes peppering him with passes. So there's a certain, we should come up with a name for this principle, Matt, where you embrace that the limitations of an offense can inflate certain players. And the limitations go ahead.
And he's also Dameon Pierce realized.
Well, right, and that's the thing. And even though Damian Harris is there to take some of the work away from him, especially New England wide receivers banged up, passing game not exactly clicking. The more interesting story there is, let's take a quick tangent. Wow, I've got you on the line, Matt. Give me a percentage, and I'm acknowledging that there's two parts to this. One is trying to read Bill Belichick's mind, or Bill Belichick and Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. And the other is our assessment of the trajectories. What is the chance 0 to 100% that Bailey Zappi will take over for Mac Jones at some point this year?
17%.
Okay. So, hey, not 0, first of all. And I think you could even read that as like how much of that, like 1 in 3, if it was just based on play, but we can't, the variable here is how willing would the Patriots be able to do that?
Because his mind's in small print,
Yeah.
And it's kind of voluminous,
yeah.
And I have to read between the spaces to find the extra code for that percentage. And that's hard. But what I keep seeing is like visions of Randy Moss skying over Charles Woodson every time we get to the receiver part of his brain. And that gets me all, I get distracted as much as Bill probably does, if that's what I'm reading in his mind.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. Bill Belichick. It's so funny having him as a force. It's kind of like the Eye of Sauron or something like that is embodied in a coach
I
in
bet
some
his
ways.
mind is scary if you got a chance to be
I'm
inside it.
sure. I'm sure. Well, because he sees everything with an accuracy that I think is almost like a superpower, but at the same time could also make you like borderline psychotic. Okay, let's get back to fantasy football, and
Okay.
then I'm going to do an off ramp here, and this should be easy. I just don't even know if this gives you pause. Would you rather have Dameon Pierce or Jonathan Taylor?
Right now, Dameon Pierce.
So I mean, if you got a trade, like if you had Jonathan Taylor today and you got a trade off in your inbox that Dameon Pierce for Jonathan Taylor, how would you think about it?
I would think about it just because I'd want to wait. I would. I'm a
Would you
conservative
counter? Would you
trader.
try to say like, "Hey, I'll do that if you throw in something"?
I would see if I could get a sweetener. I would probably want to wait one more week. If I'm Adam Harstead, I would probably make the deal. If I can channel my inner Adam Harstead, I would make the deal because I know that Taylor's probably not going to stay healthy, and that lateral agility is probably going to be an issue all year long. If I'm Matt Waldman, who tends not to trade and tells my buddies when they offer me good trades, I go, I'll wait till later to contact you, and then not contact them at all. Then I probably wouldn't do it. So
It's hard because I think Matt, I think we're gonna look back at this week, and you're right to say I want one more week. I want one more week of
yeah,
information. Okay,
yeah.
but but well, and the thing is, are we even going to see Jonathan Taylor play this weekend? He hasn't practiced yet. I'm sure whatever his status is for this week, if active, you're going to feel a little sense of instant remorse for putting him in, unless we have a full practice and the Colts say something like, "Well, we're just resting him. He's the most important part of our offense, so we want him to feel as good as he can." But what's your general approach in a situation like this where we have now some confirmation of a re-injury and in an offense in a situation? I guess there's also part of this you can fill in, Matt. What do you think of Sam Ellinger? Like, how do we feel
I
about? Go ahead.
Heading into this, I liked the idea of what they did with Sam Ellinger, and I liked what I saw of him. There's much more option running with this team, and that would involve Paris Campbell a little bit more mesh points with different players, and that can make the defense to play all 11 men on the field, and therefore open up room for Taylor. And there was room for Taylor to run. When you look at the Colts, though, and see who that they play, you can see that, they probably have good matchups with Pittsburgh. Dallas is not a great matchup. Minnesota, the Chargers is a good matchup. The Giants aren't bad. So it's not great, but it's manageable if Taylor's healthy. With Houston, you've got, I mean, you look at them, and right now it is, you do have, well, they do have Vegas too, which is easier, but excuse me, no, they don't. But Houston has Washington next. They have Miami, Cleveland, Dallas,
Yep.
Kansas City, Tennessee. Maybe the last 2 weeks, if you can make it to the last 2 weeks and face Tennessee and Jacksonville, you might have a decent
Yeah.
game for Pierce. But here's the problem. I would probably say no and try and look elsewhere, because with Taylor, here's the problem. They already gave us the hint. They traded for Zach Moss, and they added Jordan Wilkins back to
On
the
the practice
roster,
squad. Yep.
which tells you they're preparing for life without Jonathan Taylor.
Well, and what was Jonathan Taylor doing before this that we're sad to miss out on? And maybe what that speaks to, Matt, and I think it was Jacqueline Aruz, sorry if I'm not saying that right, said something about because take Pierce because Colts offensive line is bad. Is Colts offensive line bad? Or more specifically, because I think this is a good point to bring up, is it not a plus? Are we not seeing that alignment we saw? Because you could argue that there's a little blood on the offensive line's hands for what happened to Matt Ryan too.
Oh, there's a couple things with that, and I would say that Pierce is the one that I would agree that you probably want to take the chance on Pierce and see if they can get better. And I think he's got a good point with that. One is that they're missing Mark Lewinsky from last year. They're missing Travis Fisher from last year.
Right.
And this team, Russ Landy and I had this conversation, I think it's worthwhile repeating here, is that they're missing those guys. And obviously, Chris Ballard and company thought that they could leave those two guys behind and still have a good offense and get a veteran quarterback who needed protection, and it didn't happen. And so then they wound up firing Marcus Brady, who, by all accounts, from what I'm hearing, is nothing but a great coach and a good soldier and all the things that you would expect.
Aubrey Pleasant in Detroit too.
Yeah. So probably what you're seeing here is that Jim Irsay might not be all that happy about what's going on. And even though he initially said that I'm good, they've got carte blanche for the next few years, he's probably seen his third veteran quarterback in a row not work out and is wondering what's going on. So they probably decided to go with Ehlinger because Ehlinger's a better fit with the option game we talked about, the quick passing. And Matt Ryan, while he made mistakes, one of the other things that happened is because teams could blitz more effectively, these young wide receivers aren't as good at sight adjustments. Paris Campbell ran an out and up against the Titans when he was supposed to run a stop route because Bud Dupree was playing off the line. And Ryan was like, I know this guy's going to become unblocked. And Paris was on the same side as Bud. And Paris didn't get the memo that he needed to run a stop route. By the time he turned on the up part of the out, the defender who picked it off was 10 yards downfield with the ball and heading towards the end zone. And so with Alec Pierce and Campbell, you probably don't trust sight adjustments as much. And that's what these older quarterbacks do best, is to be able to read and respond to the defense. Whereas you can scheme more things up with the athletic ability of Ehlinger. He was also very good in the pocket. He really did a great job of avoiding edge pressure repeatedly and stepping up and firing the ball. And listen, they should have won that game. Michael Pittman dropped a deep over route.
Yeah, they're going to field goal chance.
That would have been a field goal chance. And Ehlinger kept him in this game and played very well. I'm not saying he's a revelation, but he deserves the tryout. And I think that this is the best time to do it for right now, even though they may be doing it as a way to they scapegoated Brady probably so that they could buy some time.
And I want to talk a little bit about that, but to go back to the Taylor thing, just to put a point on it.
Yeah,
I think that you can look back at this moment because, like you said, Matt, I want to see another week before I have to decide. But that in and of itself is a commitment to keeping Jonathan Taylor through to the next value window, whatever it is after this. Now, if he doesn't play, you're already going to see if it's announced that he's not going to play. Like, he doesn't practice tomorrow, even if he's questionable, but he doesn't practice tomorrow, you're going to see a value hit right there, right? You didn't trade him today, right? The window might be tonight, Matt. Because it's a very rare situation where you have a number 1 overall pick in fantasy drafts, in a lot of drafts, and he hasn't really done much to help teams already. There's certainly a very believable idea that it's not going to greatly turn around this year. In fact, you're asking for more things to change. So this is where this is always the pile of poop I step in fantasy, Matt, that you want things to change. You want to believe they can change. You want to be an optimist, right? This is like a human relationship story, like believing people could change and where it gets you. But with the Colts and Taylor, what's the credible story that we're going to somehow get to the same level we were at last year? Really,
and the answer is there is no credible story. The best possible story is that they have a resurgence with the run game to where that he's a 60 to 80 yard producer on the same level as as Dameon Pierce. So the answer is if it hasn't been working for you thus far and it's do or die, the answer you have to ask yourself is, and this is far less dramatic than real life, but you can take life situations and apply it this way, is do you want to go down waiting and having faith in what that was? And can you live with yourself for doing that? Or would you rather live with yourself by saying, I tried something and it just didn't work? And in this case, I believe it's more look, I tried this and I know that I might've lost out on Taylor. And if Taylor blows up in my face, well, nobody was really believing that, especially when you've got people who have some medical training who say this might be a multi-week deal with him because the lateral agility is going to be the biggest concern. And how much
the
can
re-injury,
you do taping it up? And
the re-injury. I mean, the thing is, anytime you look at Keenan Allen, I know Keenan Allen's a lot older than Jonathan Taylor. We have some things incorporated here, like the recuperative healing powers at different ages. But regardless, the opportunity is because it was a number 1 overall pick player. And look, you're willing to take, and I want to again lay this out for folks. Doing just basic auction value. Sometimes I have time to get them out during the preseason. Sometimes I don't. But I remember a pretty simple formula was like your first round pick is 28% of your cap. Your second round pick is like 18%. Your third round pick is like 12%. 9%, 6%. By the time you get to your 10th round pick, they're all players that are worth 1 unit. Like anybody after 10th and 9th and 10th rounds worth just 1 unit in terms of an auction, right? So then you can start to approximate values. And what this tells you is, a first round pick on average is worth at least twice as much as a third round pick. But Dameon Pierce, if we were drafting today, Matt, about a third round pick, yeah?
About
a third round pick. So would people, if you can get half 50 cents on the dollar for Jonathan Taylor right now, it might be one of the best things you do for your season. And you can advertise him to your whole league and find the person that's most optimistic about Taylor and see what you can flip him for. But I'm inclined to say that is, but you want to be on one side or the other. We're going to look back and say one side or the other of this was the brilliant move at this point.
And you're right to point this out. If you wait one more week, it's lost.
Oh,
because
you're
next week,
fifth round value.
Next week, no one's going to want Jonathan Taylor if it's shown that it's going to be multiple weeks,
right? Or if he just goes out and it doesn't look like Jonathan Taylor, just doesn't have that Jonathan Taylor impact.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I think that this is one of those forks in the road as we go through the fantasy season. And you're seeing, I think, Justin Fields and what he's been doing. Do you think that's going to stick? What Justin Fields has been doing? Are we seeing him in a brutal year at quarterback, Matt? A brutal fantasy year at the position. Is Justin Fields going to be that guy that, especially if you hung in with him, if someone dropped him and you picked him up, or you drafted him and you held him, now you have at least last few weeks, a top 5 quarterback who just got Chase Claypool.
Yeah, I think that you're at least getting a QB1, even if he has some lower weeks ahead. I mean, certainly against the Eagles and the Bills in weeks 15 and 16, I hope that you have.
Those are rough. But then look what Dave Davis Mills is doing tonight. So
that's right. That's right. And it may not matter as much because if everybody else is performing poorly at the quarterback position, if you probably have hung in there and been pretty good without him. So if you can get to Detroit in week 17, wow, you're in for a treat.
That's the yellow brick road.
That's the yellow brick. But you're going to have some good games because you get Detroit week 10, Atlanta week 11, the Jets week 12, the Packers in week 13. I mean, you're going to get in the playoffs with Fields.
And then week 14 bye.
Yeah, and a week 14 bye. So just I feel pretty good about the fact that they're figuring out how to use them. Claypool's the wild card. He's not, as we know, he's not a wide receiver one. Never will.
What did you think of the move? What did you think? What was your reaction when you heard? And it was the Bears' second round pick going to the Steelers.
Too much, but he'll help in the run game. He knows how to block. He'll help being a screen guy, and he's fast enough that with Fields can buy time and find him over the defense's head. So it gives them a guy that also stretches the field enough that the tight end can be activated a little bit more in that passing game too. So I think he's helpful, but it's kind of like, as long as they don't expect him to be the primary, like Dave Gettleman expected Kenny Galladay to be, they'll be all right.
And they've got Darnell Mooney to help with that. But I did see Justin Fields starting to get a little more dialed in on his deep passing last week, but he was throwing to Velus Jones or whoever was out there. If it's Chase Claypool, especially Chase Claypool, if he gets a little more my ball mentality, now you're on to something. Now you've got some elements, deep passing and using the quarterback as a runner by design. Justin Fields himself said they're looking at some stuff in the Lamar Jackson playbook. And look, the good news is, remember how the league was just befuddled at first by Lamar Jackson and the Lamar Jackson playbook. And every now and then you'll still see some weeks when defenses just look like they don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle it. And I think that you're seeing that now. Look, Dallas and New England are good defenses, or they're certainly not defenses that are going to be simple to solve.
Yep.
And Justin Fields, the other thing you look at, you see confidence, you see clarity in his decisions. So when you're watching him earlier in his career, it seemed like his radio was getting static. Not as much now.
I'll put it to you. Yeah. I mean, and we talk about this with quarterbacks all the time. The first 4 to 6 weeks, it's the defenses play their base defense, kind of just say, we're going to show you what we normally do. And we're going to see how we can gather a book on you during weeks, basically 6 through maybe the first 4 weeks of the next season. And then they start throwing that book at the quarterback and saying, all right, we know you've shown that you can look like you did in college. Now can you basically evolve past that and become a real pro? And I think Fields has gone through kind of the worst of it for his career. So now everything else is going to be kind of easy, because after that Browns game last year, I think that was the low point. That will be the low point of his career. I think he may not turn out to be great, but unlike, say, Zach Wilson, who I think is just getting worse and worse in terms of the decisions he makes in key moments, and we don't know if he's hit bottom yet. I think Fields is already coming up from the bottom.
Yeah, and what you're seeing, another thing that really stuck out to me was that they made 3 drives to the goal line against Washington and came away with 0 points on those drives. And if they had scored touchdowns on those drives and one going away like 28-12, then we would have talked about that as his coming out party in that game. And that they already had turned the corner in that game. The results weren't there. The defensive matchups got tougher, so you wondered whether they were going to keep that momentum. But they certainly are. And it's just using what you have. It's just looking at a quarterback saying, what can he do? Let's make an offense around that. And that is sure what it looks to me, Matt. It looks like that's what's happening in Miami. And there's something interesting going on. The comment I made, because you know me, I love to try to make comments about things, is that hiring Mike McDaniel and trading for Tyreek Hill and drafting Jalen Waddle, who they did. And isn't it fascinating to you that when they gave up that pick, they gave up a first-round pick to move up from 12 to 6 for Waddle? Not a trivial price. That's like Sammy Watkins kind of price, right? Yeah. And they overpaid for him. Did they overpay for him? So when but then you look at the convergence, Matt. You look at the convergence of hiring Mike McDaniel, which he was not the hot prospect. He wasn't getting interviewed everywhere. They weren't really competing with anybody for him, I think. Trading for Tyreek Hill and drafting Jalen Waddle, who did play with Tua Tagovailoa. We talked a lot about Burrow and Chase. The funny thing, though, is these Alabama receivers saying, well, Mac, I'd rather play with Mac Jones. Mac Jones is better. Well, you're playing with Tua now. The wild thing about this, Matt, why I'm bringing this all up in this fashion, is that Next Gen Stats put out this week. Matt, Tua Tagovailoa has twice as many completions, 32, to the middle of the field, over 10 air yards, than any other quarterback this year. And he's missed 2 games. Here are the leaders in completions in middle of the field, 10 plus air yards. Tua Tagovailoa, 32. Tom Brady with 16. Just stop right there. Because Tua Tagovailoa has played 2 fewer games. And then, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Jimmy Garoppolo, 16, 15. Here are the leaders in receptions. Of 10 or more yards in the middle of the field this year. Tyreek Hill with 16. Okay. Jalen Waddle with 15. And Mike Gesicki with 8. That's the top 3 in the league.
Well, this is a funny thing.
Go ahead. Because to me, this is remarkable. I mean, these are like breaking Mike McDaniel and this combination. They're breaking the football in some ways. And I don't think it's because Tua Tagovailoa is special. I think it's because they're asking him to do what he can do well. It looks like he's back at Alabama. There's so much room, and he's so confident and accurate that it's looking like pitch and catch. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll put it to you this way. Jalen Waddle was the second highest receiver I've graded in a long time, and the highest was Jamar Chase. There wasn't much difference between the two in their grade, but there was a big difference between those two and my number 3 guy. Jalen Waddle was a special player. And so when they moved up to get him, I thought that made total sense. And the fact that you can then use him like a Jarvis Landry possession receiver and not blink an eye, and you weren't even getting the most out of him at that point because that's all they had, that made it even more special to me. That just told you how good he was, that he could come in and be a possession route runner. Then Tua, I'll put it to you this way. Mm-hmm. I've always been kind of a Tua defender because I had him rated slightly. I mean, like, I'm talking like less than like a half of a point above Joe Burrow in this draft class. And now I can understand the arguments for Joe Burrow, but are you going to tell me, well, it's because of his receivers? Well, okay, but Joe Burrow has T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Jamar Chase. Are you going to tell me that we're going to look at those three, and based on how y'all drafted those three guys, you didn't rate them that far below, if at all, below Tyreek Hill and Ja'Marr Chase. And then you might say, well, it's because we didn't think Tua would be that good. Well, now he's good enough, and now they're better. Well, those receivers are good enough, but Joe Burrow isn't playing up to that expectation. So the point being is that you're right to point out that the scheme and the surrounding talent can help make or break a quarterback, and Tua is good enough. And that's the thing, is that he's playing good enough. He's always been great at getting rid of the ball quickly. He's always been good at being able to avoid pressure and getting and scrambling around. He's not as good of a pocket guy as Burrow maybe, but he's got a slightly better arm than Burrow. And he's someone that does not have any fear about tight windows at all. And he can mix it up with his receivers. So I think that what happened here is that Tua just got the wrong end of the stick when he came in and the team was about to go to the playoffs, and he got in the middle of basically a political feud and a locker room feud between coach, owner, and play. And he was like put in the middle of that as a rookie. Wasn't fair to him. And then the media went and jumped all over him. So I'm thrilled for him, because I think that this is, he deserves to have these players. And you can say, well, anybody would do well doing that. Well, Teddy Bridgewater hasn't done so well with them. I would say Skylar Thompson did okay, but it's not. But again, would you really want a rookie quarterback manning that team if you didn't have to have it? So it is a revelation, and I think he's going to be there for a while as long as he can stay healthy.
And the best part of all this is that Stephen Ross did not want this to happen. He wanted no part of this. He wanted no part of any of this.
Exactly.
If it was up to Stephen Ross, they would be somewhere completely different. They would not be here.
Yeah, suddenly it's like Major League, but for the Miami Dolphins in football.
Yeah, well, and they're having fun. I mean, Mike McDaniel's having fun. Mike McDaniel's an awesome human being, or at least as a contrast to the kind of human beings we usually get. And Tua seems like he's having fun. And real quickly on Joe Burrow, and I'm going to give you one thing to play wet blanket Matt Waldman before we sign out. When you watch Joe Burrow on Monday night last week, and like you said, it's the combination, right? Because as soon as you take Ja'Marr Chase, and shame on me for thinking this is a resilient offense. They can adapt. They have adapted in the past. They have enough talent and enough experience that they can make this work. Well, in fact, you take away Ja'Marr Chase, and it's like the house of cards. This offense is a house of cards. And T. Higgins can't really be a number one against number one corners. And Tyler Boyd,
he's obviously a slot receiver.
He's a slot receiver. Joe Mixon in this running game, not good, not a plus. You don't want to have to rely on him or this running game right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you're wondering if there's going to be some more Samaje Perine. So you take away Ja'Marr Chase, and look what happens. But again, that's because that's where we get to Hill plus Waddle. So here's the Matt Waldman wet blanket. I'm so excited about, and my man, Ian's cat is out in the chat room, so he is with me on this. I'm so excited about Isaiah Likely. I really feel like this is the thing that, the genie's out of the bottle, and injuries help, but it doesn't matter, because what I think we saw is the player we saw in the preseason realized in the regular season, and the confidence, and not just as a receiver or an offensive weapon, but as a blocker and as a player the team feeds off of. I think it's clear watching the energy flow of this team, what happens when Isaiah Likely is involved in this offense. And Lamar Jackson, he's a great quarterback, Matt. I think for like a shortest line between 2 points, A and B, like he's going to, especially with Mark Andrews banged up, Rashod Bateman out for the year now. I think something really special could happen here, especially when you add in, I think here's a way I'm going to do like the hot take version of it, right? Isaiah Likely could be what we hoped Kyle Pitts could be for fantasy this year, or at the very least, the closest thing we're going to get, since Kyle Pitts isn't going to do it.
I would like to see that happen. I think the tough part for me is that I still think that Lamar Jackson trusts Devin Duvernay more.
Well, it could be Duvernay. It could be Duvernay. I'll leave that open.
And I'm a Devin Duvernay stan. So if I was going to go for either one, whenever Mark Andrews has been hurt or their running game has been banged up or something's been going on, Greg Roman goes, oh, okay, I'll be somewhat imaginative and I'll use Devin Duvernay in the way that Mount Waldman's been begging Ravens media that they would use him, which is like Danny Woodhead plus for this team, and they could open up your offense a lot more, especially now that you add Demarcus Robinson, who it's not like, ooh, Demarcus Robinson. I mean, I think every fantasy player would like be a smart aleck, and you could say
he can move the chains. He can move the chains, but come on, he's not going to add value to his target.
He's your number 3 receiver. You wish that was your number 4. So maybe likely can be that number 3 over Robinson in that regard. But I think that it'll be a process before that happens, because while we like to say that Jim Harbaugh is imaginative, or John Harbaugh is imaginative, and we'd like to say that Greg Roman has done some imaginative things with this offense, I think they're a little bit on the stodgier side than what people realize. And they're probably going to roll with the veteran more than they will with Likely. And we still need to see, I still think we need to see Likely beat certain types of defenders one-on-one to realize that Pittsian promise.
Well, to get that treatment, right? The thing is, if he gets the Pitts treatment, then no, he's not going to be Kyle Pitts. This is predicated on the idea that they're not they're taking him a little bit more lightly, and some of it is because you're defending Lamar Jackson. That's always your focus as a defense first and foremost. You know, you're mesmerized by Lamar Jackson, so it makes it easier for guys to get behind you. And we saw earlier this year Lamar Jackson putting on a show as a passer, but we'll see.
Yeah. Do you, just a quick question for you? I mean, just to be fun about this, is like, do you think the Miami Dolphins have like a cardboard cutout of Stephen Ross, and they they take off take off an article of clothing, or like those horn rim glasses that he has every time they have a win, you know, or score a certain amount of points, you know? And are there some Rex Ryan pumps underneath the shoes that they've got going on with Stephen Ross? I don't know. I think I'd be more. That'd be more of a Halloween horror movie for me than it would be something like kind of in a harassment sort of way that they did in Major League.
If you want to go, what would be a really interesting topic and a very taboo topic is to get players speaking off the record about what they think about certain owners. Oh man. Yeah. I'm buying that book. Where's my popcorn, my bonbons? I'm gonna just sit and I'm gonna just read that.
Get the room deodorizer every time you close that book. That's all I'd have to say.
Yeah. Drink the tea. So always interesting, always fascinating NFL. While we've been talking here, the Eagles have gone ahead 21-14, but the Texans, showing out as the Astros are in the lead right now. And it's always great to hang out with everybody. We're at the halfway point of the season now. And after this week, we'll see. And just like for the NFL and fantasy football, what you do from here on out is what matters. I mean, I know some of my teams are kind of like the Detroit Lions this year. I know they're not going anywhere. But you can always do like with the Texans tonight and pull off a inspired upset. And if you're still in it in some way, shape, or form, even 3-5, you're 3-5, you're in it in a lot of these divisions in the NFL. You're still in it. It's what you do from here on out. We're going to help you at Footballguys and keep you company and maybe give you someone to blame. When it all goes very wrong, that's important too. But you don't need that, folks, because you're so classy.